$50. That's what I had. Not $50 plus a gift card I forgot about. Not $50 and whatever's already sitting in my cabinet from last month's Costco run. 50 actual dollars pulled from my wallet, sitting on the passenger seat of my car in the Dollar General parking lot. And I want to be upfront with you before we get into this. I went into this skeptical. I've seen videos where people claim to build emergency kits on a tiny budget, and then the fine print shows up. Some items were already on hand, or prices may vary by region, or they're counting items that are basically useless in an actual emergency. I'm not doing that. Every item I bought today is going in the camera at the end. You'll see the receipt. You'll see the total. And you'll see exactly what kind of emergency coverage it actually buys you. Because here's what most people don't want to admit. The reason the average household has less than 4 days of food is not because people can't afford to prepare. It's because nobody has ever shown them how to do it at a price point that feels real. $50 feels real. $50 is the difference between what you had before and what you have after one grocery run that you almost didn't make. So let's find out what $50 actually gets you at Dollar General. Before I walked in, I set 3 rules for myself. Rule 1. Everything has to have a minimum 2-year shelf life. I'm not building a week's worth of groceries here. I'm building a pantry that will still be good. 2 Thanksgivings from now if I never need to touch it. Rule 2. Everything has to be cookable with nothing more than water and a basic heat source. No specialty equipment. No recipes that require a refrigerator or an oven. Rule 3. The end result has to cover at least 2 weeks of realistic calorie needs for one adult. 2 weeks, minimum. That's the baseline I'm testing against. Dollar General is an interesting choice for this kind of build, and not everyone would make it. Some people go straight to warehouse stores when they're thinking about emergency food. But here's why Dollar General actually makes sense for a lot of people in the United States. There are more Dollar General stores in America than there are Starbucks locations. If you live in a rural area, a small town, or anywhere that isn't 30 minutes from a major retailer, Dollar General might be the most accessible store you have. And in an emergency, accessible matters more than optimal. Now, the first thing I noticed when I walked in is that Dollar General's store layout changes a lot depending on location. Some stores have expanded grocery sections. Some are still mostly household goods and cleaning products. The store I went to had a decent food section, canned goods along one wall, dry goods in the middle aisle, and a small section of condiments and seasonings near the back. Your store might look different, but the categories I shopped in are universal enough that this translates. The first item I grabbed was rice. And I want to talk about why rice is non-negotiable for any emergency pantry build, regardless of budget. A 2-pound bag of white rice at Dollar General costs around $2. $2. That 2-pound bag contains approximately 3,400 calories. For perspective, the average adult needs roughly 1,800 to 2,000 calories per day. So $2 buys you almost 2 full days of caloric energy in a single product. The shelf life on white rice stored in a sealed container is conservatively 25 to 30 years. I bought 3 bags, 6 pounds of white rice for $6, covering me for roughly 6 full days on calories from rice alone if I ate nothing else. Which I wouldn't, because we're building a complete pantry here, not a punishment exercise. But here's the thing about white rice that most people overlook. It's not just cheap. It's the most flexible base ingredient in the world. Whatever else you have in the pantry, beans, canned vegetables, a spoonful of soy sauce. It all goes over rice. Every culture on Earth has built a cuisine around rice because it works with everything. In an emergency, that flexibility is not a luxury. It's a lifeline. I moved on to beans. Dried black beans, 4-pound bag, about $4. And before you skip past this because you've heard it before, hang on. Most people who buy dried beans for emergency storage have never actually cooked them from dry in a real situation, and that matters. Dried beans need to be soaked for several hours before cooking, and then they need about an hour of boiling. That means you need water, fuel, and time. Black beans store well, taste good, and pair perfectly with rice to create a complete protein, meaning together, those two foods give your body all 9 essential amino acids it can't make on its own. But if you were in a situation with limited fuel, you'd want to soak the beans overnight before you need them. I grabbed one 4-pound bag and moved on. Now I needed canned protein. And this is where Dollar General's selection gets a little limited compared to a bigger grocery store, but there's still plenty to work with. Canned tuna. Each can at Dollar General runs about $1, sometimes $1.25 depending on the brand. I grabbed 8 cans, that's 8 servings of 20 to 25 grams of protein, ready to eat straight from the can with nothing but a pull tab. No cooking required, no heat source, just open it and eat it. In a grid-down scenario, canned tuna is basically money. I spent about $9 on tuna. I also grabbed 4 cans of canned chicken. Now, canned chicken is one of those things that sounds weird until you've actually used it in an emergency meal, and then you realize it's a completely different category of useful than you expected. Canned chicken shredded over rice with a can of soup? That's a real meal. Canned chicken mixed into pasta with whatever seasoning you have? That's comfort food. 4 cans for about $6. Worth every penny. Next, I went for canned vegetables, and this is where I want to slow down and make a point that most emergency food videos gloss over. You can build a perfectly caloric pantry out of rice, beans, and tuna, and you will develop nutritional deficiencies within weeks. Not hypothetically. Actually, scurvy, the disease that sailors got from eating nothing but preserved meat, with no fresh food, can begin to develop in as little as 4 to 6 weeks without vitamin C. In the modern era, where most people associate scurvy with pirates and the 18th century, it's easy to forget that it's a real condition that real people still develop under the right circumstances. Canned vegetables are your insurance policy against that. I grabbed 4 cans of mixed vegetables, corn, peas, carrots, green beans, for about $1.25 each. I grabbed 2 cans of diced tomatoes for about $1.75 each, and I grabbed 2 cans of spinach for about $1.50 each. Spinach is one of those foods that almost nobody puts in their emergency pantry, and almost everybody should. A single can of spinach gives you a significant portion of your daily iron, calcium, and vitamins A and K. It doesn't taste amazing on its own, which is why it gets mixed into other things, but nutritionally, it's punching way above its price point. Total for canned vegetables, around $13. I still had about $16 left, and I hadn't bought seasonings yet, which is where most budget preppers make their biggest mistake. Stop here for a second, because I want to explain something that changed the way I think about emergency food entirely. The concept is called appetite fatigue, and it's the reason that military rations are designed with variety even when that variety is incredibly expensive to produce and ship. The human brain is wired to crave novelty in food. When you eat the same thing over and over with no variation in flavor, your brain actually starts to suppress hunger signals. You stop feeling hungry before you've eaten enough calories, You start skipping meals. And in an emergency situation where your body is already under stress, missing calories has consequences that go well beyond discomfort. The fix is almost embarrassingly cheap. Seasonings. At Dollar General, I found a small but usable selection of spices and condiments near the back of the store. I grabbed garlic powder for about $2, onion powder for about $2, a small container of cumin for about $2, and soy sauce, one bottle, for about $2.50. That's $8.50 in seasonings that will completely transform every meal I make from this pantry from edible to actually satisfying. Garlic powder and cumin over black beans with rice is genuinely delicious. A splash of soy sauce on plain white rice makes it taste like something from a restaurant instead of something from a survivalist film. I also grabbed a small jar of honey, about $2.50. Honey is the only food in existence with a documented shelf life of literally thousands of years. Archaeologists have found edible honey in Egyptian tombs dated to 3000 BC. A jar of honey sitting in your pantry will outlast every other item in this build by centuries. But beyond shelf life, honey does something specific in an emergency context that nothing else does. It satisfies the craving for sweetness, which is psychologically stabilizing in a way that's hard to quantify, but impossible to ignore when you're under stress. $2.50 for honey is one of the best investments in this entire build. And then I grabbed instant coffee. One canister, about $5. Hear me out on this before you skip it. I'm not putting coffee in this pantry for the calories, though it does contain a small amount. I'm putting it here because morale is a survival resource. The psychological dimension of emergency preparedness is consistently underestimated by people who think about it purely in terms of macronutrients and shelf life. Having a hot cup of coffee in the morning when everything around you is difficult is worth more than its caloric value in ways that are genuinely measurable. Studies on soldiers, disaster survivors, and people in extended isolation consistently show that small comforts play an outsized role in maintaining cognitive function and emotional resilience. $5 for coffee is $5 for your ability to think clearly when you need to. I also grabbed a box of salt, iodized, about $1.50. Salt is worth a separate mention because most people take it for granted until they're in a situation where food is under-seasoned and every meal feels joyless and bland. But there's also a more important reason salt belongs in an emergency pantry. Iodized salt is one of the only reliable sources of iodine in a limited diet. Iodine deficiency affects thyroid function, and thyroid function affects everything from your metabolism to your cognitive clarity. The iodine in iodized salt was one of the greatest public health interventions of the 20th century, reducing goiter and developmental disorders across the American population. In a situation where your diet is restricted to pantry staples, iodized salt is doing real nutritional work beyond flavor. I walked to the register with my basket full. I had been moving through the store for about 45 minutes, checking labels, comparing prices, doing mental math on calories and shelf life. And here's where I need to be honest with you about what happened next. The total came to $47.63. I had $50. I had $2.37 left in change. So let me tell you exactly what I got, and let's actually do the math together, because this is the part where the skeptic in you should be satisfied or not. 6 pounds of white rice, $6, approximately 10,200 calories. Shelf life, 25 years. 4 pounds of dried black beans, $4, approximately 6,200 calories. Shelf life, 10 years or more. 8 cans of tuna, approximately $9, approximately 1,600 calories and 200 grams of protein. Shelf life, 3 to 5 years. 4 cans of canned chicken, $6, approximately 600 calories and 100 grams of protein. Shelf life, 3 to 5 years. 4 cans of mixed vegetables, approximately $5. Vitamins, minerals, fiber. Shelf life, 3 to 5 years. 2 cans of diced tomatoes, approximately $3.50. Lycopene, vitamin C, flavor base for dozens of recipes. Shelf life, 3 to 5 years. 2 cans of spinach, $3. Iron, calcium, vitamins A and K. Shelf life, 3 to 5 years. Garlic powder, onion powder, cumin, $6 total. Shelf life, 3 to 5 years. Soy sauce, $2.50. Shelf life, 3 years or more, opened, indefinitely sealed. Honey, $2.50. Shelf life, literally unlimited. Salt, $1.50. Shelf life, unlimited. Instant coffee, $5. Shelf life, 2 years. Total calories from this build, approximately 19,000 to 20,000 calories. At 800 calories per day, that covers approximately 10 to 11 days of full caloric needs for one adult. Now, I told you up front I was shooting for 2 weeks, and I'm going to be completely straight with you. I came up short. At $50, hitting 14 full days of calories for one person is extremely difficult unless you're willing to cut the protein almost entirely and just buy rice and beans. I wasn't willing to do that because a calorie-only approach to emergency food is nutritionally irresponsible, and I'd rather give you an honest 11 days of balanced eating than a technically correct 14 days of nutritional poverty. But here's what I want you to actually take from that gap, because this is important. 10 to 11 days of food, built for under $50, with genuine nutritional variety, reasonable protein content, and a shelf life measured in years, not weeks, is not a small thing. It is a fundamentally different life situation than having 4 days of food. If a storm knocks out power for a week, this pantry feeds you without a single grocery run. If supply chain disruption hits your area for a week and a half, this pantry covers you while your neighbors are scrambling. That is real, meaningful, tangible security that costs less than a single dinner for 2 at a sit-down restaurant. And the math gets significantly better as soon as you add $20 or $30 more dollars. Let me show you what happens at $75 and at $100, because the curve of value you get per additional dollar is remarkable. At $25 more, you can add another 6 pounds of rice, more dried beans, a few more cans of protein, and a multivitamin, which is arguably the highest value single addition you can make to any limited diet pantry. The multivitamin covers every nutritional gap that a basic pantry can't address. A 90-count bottle of daily vitamins at Dollar General runs about $8 to $10 and turns your 11-day emergency supply into a much safer 14-day supply from a health perspective. At that point, you've covered yourself for 2 full weeks on $75 total. At $100, you start getting into real redundancy and comfort. Peanut butter, which is one of the highest calorie per dollar foods that exists, becomes affordable in multiple jars. You can add crackers, which matter more for morale than nutrition, but still matter. You can add a second type of grain, like pasta or oats, which dramatically reduce appetite fatigue. And you can start to think about a small portable camping stove and a canister of propane, because the ability to cook your food without household electricity is the difference between this pantry being theoretical and it being actually usable in the scenarios that matter. But let's come back to $50, because I don't want to spend too much time on the aspirational version when the real-world version is what most people actually need. There's something I've been thinking about since I walked out of that Dollar General with my 2 bags. The people who need emergency food security the most are also the people who are least likely to be able to access it through the channels that preppers typically talk about. Warehouse store memberships cost money. The ability to buy in bulk requires upfront capital that a lot of households don't have. $50 spread over 2 or 3 shopping trips at a store that's already in their neighborhood is a framework that actually works for people who can't spend $200 in one day on food they won't eat for months. That's not a small thing to get right. Now, let me walk you through what cooking from this pantry actually looks like day to day, because I think seeing the meals helps make this feel real rather than abstract. Breakfast. A cup of cooked white rice takes about 15 to 20 minutes in boiling water, with a drizzle of honey. Roughly 300 calories. Or if you want something hot to drink first, a cup of instant coffee while the rice cooks. Simple. Takes about 20 minutes total. Requires only a pot and a heat source. Lunch. Black bean soup. Soak the beans the night before in whatever vessel you have. Drain and cover with fresh water. Boil for 45 minutes to an hour. Add garlic powder, cumin, salt, and half a can of diced tomatoes. That single pot of beans, if you make a full batch from a pound of dried beans, gives you approximately 4 to 5 servings. You eat one now and have the rest for tomorrow. Cost per serving, under $1. Calories per serving, roughly 400 with the tomatoes. Protein, about 15 grams. Dinner, canned tuna over white rice with soy sauce and whatever canned vegetables you have on hand. Open the tuna, drain it, fluff it over a bowl of cooked rice, splash some soy sauce, add a spoonful of canned corn or mixed vegetables. 5 minutes of prep time. No cooking beyond the rice. Roughly 500 calories and 25 grams of protein. And honestly, it tastes decent. Not restaurant food, but decent, satisfying, and real. That day of eating comes to roughly 1,200 to 1,300 calories, a little below the 1 ounce 800 target, which is why snacking on a spoonful of peanut butter or an extra serving of rice with honey helps fill the gap. But you're not hungry. You're not malnourished. You're fed. You've had protein and vegetables and complex carbohydrates, and you've done it on a day's worth of pantry food that cost you somewhere between $3 and $4. Let me also talk about storage, because this is an area where a lot of people make decisions that actually undermine the shelf life advantages of the food they just bought. The rice that comes in the paper bag from Dollar General is not going to last 25 years in that bag. Paper and thin plastic bags allow moisture and air to pass through over time. If you want the full shelf life benefit from white rice, you need to transfer it into an airtight container, a mason jar with a tight lid, a plastic storage container with a rubber seal, or ideally a mylar bag with an oxygen absorber. Oxygen absorbers sound complicated, but they're not. They're small packets that you drop into a sealed container before you close it, and they remove the oxygen from the air inside, which dramatically slows the degradation of any food stored alongside them. They cost almost nothing and extend shelf life from years to decades. The canned goods don't need any special treatment. Just keep them somewhere cool and away from direct sunlight. Heat is the main enemy of canned food shelf life. A shelf in a cool interior closet is ideal. A cabinet next to the oven is a bad choice, and keep them off the floor. Moisture can accumulate on concrete floors and cause the labels and bottoms of cans to deteriorate over time. The seasonings will last longest in a cool, dark, dry location. Spice potency does degrade with time, But the food safety of dried spices is not really a concern. They won't go bad in any dangerous sense, they just lose flavor intensity. If your garlic powder is 5 years old, you might need to use a little more of it to get the same effect. That's a minor issue. The honey and salt need literally nothing. Store them however you want. They will be fine. The coffee will stay at full quality for about 2 years, sealed, and about a month once opened. This is the shortest shelf life item in the build, which is worth knowing if you're rotating your pantry over time. Let me address one more thing before we wrap up, because I know it's coming as a comment, and I'd rather answer it now. Someone is going to point out that $50 doesn't account for water, and that most of what I bought requires water to cook. That's true, and it's an important point. Dried rice and beans both need significant amounts of water to prepare. In an emergency where tap water is unavailable or unsafe, having dry pantry goods without water is only half of a solution. Water storage is its own topic that deserves its own video, but here's the short version. The standard guidance from FEMA and the Red Cross is 1 gallon of water per person per day for drinking and basic sanitation. For 11 days, one person needs 11 gallons of water. Commercial water storage containers in various sizes, from 1-gallon jugs to 5-gallon jugs to large 55-gallon barrels, are available from hardware stores and Amazon. The simplest entry-level approach is to simply fill clean containers from your tap and replace them every 6 to 12 months. For 11 days, you'd need about 11 1-gallon jugs, which you can buy for under 50 cents each at any grocery store, or even reuse from other liquids. The full picture of emergency preparedness is always food plus water plus a way to cook. The $50 I spent today covers the food. Water and a heat source are the other 2 legs of that stool. Here's where I land on the original question, which was, can you build a meaningful emergency pantry at Dollar General for $50? Yes. Not a perfect one. Not a 2-week one. Not one that will impress anyone at a prepper convention with its sophistication. But a real one. An 11-day one. A nutritionally honest one that has protein, vegetables, calories, flavor, and a shelf life measured in years rather than days. A pantry that will feed one adult through a prolonged power outage, a week of supply chain disruption, or any of the dozens of ordinary emergencies that don't make the news but happen to real families every month. And if you can do that with $50 and 1 trip to a store that's already in your neighborhood, then the reason most people don't have emergency food security is not money. It's just that nobody showed them it was this achievable. All of the items I bought today are listed in the description below with quantities, prices, and the calorie and protein breakdown for each one. If you want to see the exact receipt, it's in the pinned comment. I show everything. If this video was useful to you, subscribe, because next week I'm going to take this $50 build and show you exactly how to double its value for an additional $25, which items to add first, where to buy them, and what the combined 2-week pantry looks like when you take it seriously on a real budget.